Our heritage is our pride, from the languages that we speak, from the food that we eat, and the clothes that we wear. South African traditional attire and accessories have made it to the global stage of fashion houses. Our modern traditional wear has inspired a lot of designers. And most South Africans, when they get married, they celebrate their culture by wearing their traditional attire. Have you ever wondered who owns the intellectual property that is vested in this traditional attire? We're fortunate today that our director, Tumelo Chayamashabela, has joined us to discuss this very interesting topic. She's going to help us decipher this question and have more clarity in terms of who owns intellectual property in our traditional attire. Welcome, Tumelo, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for making time, Kutlwano. Thanks.
Okay, so let's get right into it. I'm going to ask you, are there any laws that protect our intellectual property that is vested in our traditional attire, the accessories, the language that we speak?
Like you're saying, the cultural, our cultural heritages, in most instances, we have found that they get to be commercialized or exploited without communities or the owners of these cultural heritages actually benefiting from those exploitation activities. So a lot of countries are trying to find ways in which they can actually protect these cultural heritages and cultural activities. So if you look at New Zealand, in New Zealand, what the New Zealand Intellectual Property Institute, what they've done is that they've tried to come up with a legislation that assists in protecting the Maori people or the cultures and the heritage of the Maori people. For example, in New Zealand, if you try to file a trademark that is going to result in offending the Maori people, that trademark will not be granted. Another country that, another country. So this illustrates how important the culture and the heritage of the Maori people is to New Zealand, to the government of New Zealand. Another country that comes to mind is Kenya. So Kenya, through one of their legislations, I think it's called Protection of Traditional Knowledge and Cultural Expressions. So this act in Kenya, it tries to ensure that anyone who tries to exploit or commercialize, cultural heritage or a cultural expression or traditional knowledge, the communities from whom this cultural knowledge emanate is supposed to receive royalties. So through that legislation, Kenya is trying to ensure that the communities eventually get to be able to enjoy the fruits of those cultural or indigenous knowledge. And coming back home to South Africa, like you said, on the 24th of September, we were all celebrating our diverse culture, and we were all celebrating our cultures in various activities. So South Africa, what they've been doing, and over the years, is they came up with a protection and promotion, development, and management of indigenous knowledge. South Africa is trying to provide adequate protection for traditional knowledge and ensure that communities also get to benefit from exploitation of this traditional knowledge. So, people will be, or communities will be compensated whenever their traditional knowledge is being used. So you can see a lot of countries are really trying to find ways in which cultural activities or cultural knowledge and traditional knowledge can be protected, as well as people or communities from whom these traditional knowledge emanate are able to be compensated whenever anyone tries to exploit or commercialize that particular traditional knowledge. I know India is one country that has done very well with regard to the protection of their traditional knowledge and exploitation of it, and ensuring that communities get to benefit. India is, I would say, it's one country that is a step ahead with regard to the protection of traditional knowledge.
I myself am very inspired to see that governments are taking traditional knowledge seriously, and they're taking steps to protect this knowledge and intellectual property that is vested in it. Now, there's always the issue of ownership. Who owns this intellectual property and who gets the royalties from commercialization of the intellectual property?
Yeah, so that question is it's a very complicated question, because the way the traditional knowledge and our cultural heritage are, they're not the same as your normal subject matters that are protected by the various intellectual property rights. So if you look at the common thing within the various intellectual property rights, we have a one owner or an author or an inventor who actually created that particular invention or a trademark or a copyrightable material. So that is why it was important that governments come up with a different legislation, because these traditional knowledge, unfortunately, they do not fit into the normal legislations that are protecting are called the normal intellectual property rights. So the reason why I'm saying it is complicated with regard to as to who gets to own the traditional knowledge, because in most instances, these knowledges are knowledges that have been passed through generations within a particular community. So we can't really pinpoint and say so and so actually owns that particular traditional knowledge. So normally what we would do is, for example, if we take our very own Dr. Esther Mahlangu, so what she has done is that she has used her traditional knowledge that she got through that knowledge that has been passed within the Indebele community. However, in addition to taking the traditional knowledge, she used her creativity, she used her creative knowledge in coming up with designs and art that made people like your Oprah Winfrey and Alicia Keys to actually eventually want to buy those kind of artwork. So at the end of the day, that particular artwork will then be owned by Dr. Esther Mahlangu, because she additional to the traditional knowledge, she included her own creative knowledge. So she will own that particular intellectual property. So we spoke about our traditional attires. I mean, we have beautiful attires in South Africa, and you saw on the 24th where everybody, I mean, we have 11 official languages, and these 11 official languages, they even represent different cultures in South Africa. So you can imagine how beautiful it was on the 24th, where all of these people, like the Ndebeles, the Sotos, and the Ngunis, were wearing the different attires. So the question would be, who owns these attires? Again, it's our traditional knowledge. There isn't any one person that could say that I own an Indebele attire. So however, what I've seen is that a lot of artists, because of their creativity, they take these attires, our traditional attires, and then they incorporate their creativity into those attires. So at the end of the day, what comes out of it is an improved attire, and then that particular artist will then own intellectual property relating to it. In cases where this artist would have been commissioned by a company, depending on the contract that they would have concluded, then the artist may own that attire, or the commissioner or may own that particular attire. So with regard to ownership, and especially if you have used traditional knowledge, I would say it is very important that you engage with us at Chaya Mashabela Tennis, so that we can look at the entire product and be able to advise you. Another point that maybe I would like to mention, and this relates more to patents. Let's say, for example, you have a patent. However, this patent was based on, on some plant that you took from a community. We have what is called a Form Peace 26, that you are actually obligated to tell us whether or not your medicament actually is based on any plant that you have taken from a particular community. This is going to ensure that at the end of the day, when you commercialize that patent that is protected that protects that medicament, that community can eventually benefit, and there's some benefit sharing that will accrue to that particular community. You spoke about who gets to get the royalties. So eventually it will not be one person that is going to get any royalties. It will be a community. So it's a process. So it's not an easy thing with regard to ownership, because it's not your traditional intellectual property right that falls within the traditional way of protecting intellectual property.
Okay, thank you very much. That was so interesting. It's always very informative when you start learning about intellectual property in different things, like even your traditional attire, intellectual property that you get from, a tree that your grandmother uses to help you, heal from a flu or something. That is intellectual property. And there are systems that are being put in place to protect that traditional knowledge. Mm-hmm.
If I may add, Kutlwano, I think people, when they think of intellectual property, they think of just patents, and they think of just being patents, and that's it. But this intellectual property is all over us. It's all around us. Everything that we do, we see every day there is intellectual property. So it is very important, and it is also available to all types of industries. You can never say, IP does not apply to me because I'm a designer or because I'm in the fashion industry. Intellectual property is also there. So I think that's the whole aim of Chaya Mashabela attorneys, in ensuring that we educate the people about the various types of intellectual property and how they can protect them and how they can commercialize them.
Exactly that. And if they want more information about intellectual property in the fashion industry, they can go to our page and then read all about it. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for giving us this information that is so interesting. I'm looking forward to the next bit of knowledge that you're going to drop on us. Can't wait to see what that is.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Kutlwano.
Thank you.